All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Blueprint Leadership Podcast. I'm Kaleth Wright, your 18th Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force. During this time, you'll hear from some of my friends and my favorite leaders. We'll discuss all things leadership. Now, our goal is to provide insights, tips, and ultimately, we'd like to help current and future leaders find their path and reach their leadership goals. We call it Blueprint, but as we all know, there's no one way to lead. We want to share our experiences, give advice, and hopefully we can help you find your path and reach your potential as the great leader that you are.
A lot of folks have been sold a bad carrot, right? You know, don't do it. Or do it and you'll get promoted, you know? And that's usually the wrong way to attack it. I always got to reflect back on how long we've been doing this. You know, you're talking about the Prussian army, you're talking about our first real standpoint for discipline and morale and welfare. This goes back, you know, you're talking Feldwebel, von Steuben. We've been around doing this particular job for a very long time. A lot of folks just don't understand that, and they just think, oh, it's a job. You know, it's just a job. Nah, man, this is you gotta be passionate about this. You gotta love what you do.
Our guest for today is my teammate, my main man, maybe more than anybody that has been in this past few years. This is my wingman. We've spent countless hours on the road together in the last 3 years, close to 280 days or so a year. And, man, I just couldn't do what I do without this guy. He's the special duty manager for First Sergeants for the United States Air Force. Some people refer to him, and maybe he refers to himself as the First Sergeant for the Air Force. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Chief Master Sergeant Manny Piñeiro.
Chief, thank you so much, man. What an honor to be here. I appreciate the time, and more so, I know your long list of associates. So countering the fact that you mentioned me is humbling, so I appreciate you.
Yeah, man. Thanks for being here. You know, we do this all the time. They have these types of conversations on a pretty regular basis, normally on airplanes or in airport terminals or in lodging rooms. But I think it's good to have you, and I think it's good for our airmen across the Air Force to hear some of the things that you have to say. So let's just jump right in, man. How does a kid from the Bronx end up a phenomenal leader like yourself? Tell us your story.
So, you know, I'll tell you, I think it's a caveat to my life, right? Surrounding yourself with people who probably saw more in me than I saw in myself. And that's a testament to our Air Force when we try to build leadership. But yeah, you said it best. New York City, down and dirty. And just like this conversation, we're going to keep it ODB, so We'll be raw. I'll be straight up and tell you that it was not a self-made opportunity. I just didn't. I saw potential, and a lot of folks who were telling me they saw a lot in me that probably the city wasn't going to offer. Mm-hmm. So, you know, get away from all the hustle of the 80s. It was a good opportunity for me to define and start making a new version of myself. So
did you always want to be a chief? Did you know you were going to stay in when you first joined? I mean, how did it all play out?
Master plan. I think it's copied throughout our Air Force when you ask people about their first opportunities to serve. 4 years. I was going to take a trade, try to get some school, and jump right back to the city and just see how I can redefine whatever it is I needed to do.
Yeah. So what changed?
So, you know, my background, right? I'm a cook. I'm a services guy by trade, mm-hmm. and you know, we call them chefs now. But at that time, I had a good NCO who took me under the wing and basically let me know Air Force is important, but we really don't need you if you're going to have an attitude. And as you can imagine, I had an attitude.
Yeah, well, you still got an attitude. But
because I surround myself with people with attitudes.
Yeah. Now, so would you say this NCO, would you have considered him at the time, maybe you didn't use the term mentor, but would you say he was a mentor?
Oh, definitely. He shaped me 10 year. So at that time, staff sergeants were, you know, they had a couple of extra years in the box. And he definitely took me aside and told me that, you know, this is important, but I needed to make sure and know that it was important. Mm-hmm. So he took me over to the Honor Guard, you know, so it's funny because our stories are very similar in that capacity. And that was it. I learned some discipline, some structure. Before I knew it, I was good at my craft. and enough that somebody else stepped in and said, have I ever thought about becoming MTI? And, you know, the story continues, and here I am, so forth.
Yeah. So do you think, so I don't know this particular NCO's name, but it seems like he had a profound impact on your career, very similar to my career. How do you think we have that level of mentorship in the Air Force today?
I think it's hard to find them. I think we have a lot of NCOs that care, but to actually take an opportunity to pull someone that they know that has potential and see a lot in their opportunities, you know, it's difficult. I think right now we have a tendency to promote a lot earlier than we used to. It doesn't define how they lead, but I think it plays into a culture of shaping what's expected for a young airman.
Right. It's difficult, but it's not impossible, though, right?
No way in the world. You know, we got a lot of great NCOs out there. You know, we call them the backbone for a reason, right? They're the ones making it happen every day. But I think it takes a special person to actually understand and how they have their own life situations kind of planned and balanced enough that they can, you know, provide the right guidance to someone else.
Yeah. So speaking of guidance, what guidance would you give to, you know, the young up and coming NCOs who aspire to be mentors? What advice would you give them for?
Something that I push on a daily basis is, man, stick true to who you are. You know, one of the things that I think has made me have these opportunities is that I never forgot where I came from. You know, we live on this golden rule of your word is everything, but you have to stick to it. It's easy to maneuver away from that because, you know, there's a lot of self in what we do. We want to make sure that we're positioning ourselves for the right jobs and the right opportunities, but you gotta know your own. You know, you gotta be attached to your vulnerabilities. You gotta know yourself, and I think in knowing you'll have a better opportunity to explore, and you'll see that in others.
Yeah. So I bet a lot of our airmen appreciate the mentorship that you've provided them, not only as an NCO, but primarily because you've been a damn first sergeant for so long as a first sergeant. So tell us about that, man. How long have you been a first sergeant, and how has that journey been?
Wow. So started my first sergeant career in 2003. 2002-ish kind of saw a little bit of that additional duty piece, but hard to believe that I've been in this game, you know.
2003?
2003.
16 years ago you became a first sergeant?
It's crazy, Chief. I can absolutely tell you that I am the oldest first sergeant in the Air Force.
Yeah.
I stepped away for a little while. You know, just like anything, it takes its toll.
What's a little while?
About a year and change. I actually did a different job, which was a focus of a different mission. But you know, something led me back. I actually had an opportunity to just recently brief at your command chief's course, and someone approached me because I said, you know, I'm a first sergeant that happens to be a chief. And people took that as man, you're a chief, and I go, no, I've been doing this a lot longer than I've been a chief. So I'm kind of true to my role in our position in the Air Force.
Yeah. So 15 years on paper, really, as a first sergeant. What's been the lesson? What have you learned?
Every day I'm trying to grow myself first. You know, I think the biggest and probably the most challenging thing is not to lose yourself, your own identity. Because I think as we travel through the Air Force, good, bad, or ugly, indifferent with leadership, you always want to stick to what you know and what has worked for you. Yeah. For me, it's really surrounding myself with the talent. You know, so I've been blessed. Being part of Team 18 has been amazing. Yeah. And what a great way to finish a career.
Yeah. So how has anything changed? So from 2003, when you first became a brand new diamond wearing first sergeant, until today, right, where you're responsible for, you get to a pretty broad perspective. You know, how has the career field changed?
Tremendously. I think I'll give you a reality check. When I came into the first sergeant community, we had pagers. So that was our pace of contact, right? There was no blueprint for Bluetooth, right? Yeah. The reality is that our communication has changed, and the challenges that our Air Force has come across in the years has changed. You know, we didn't have open, you know, transgender. You know, we didn't have mill-to-mill same-sex marriages. So there's a lot of our society has changed. in lieu, that's going to change the pulse of how we do our business in the Air Force.
Now, you mentioned communication has changed, right? You guys had pagers, and certainly there was internet in 2003, but there wasn't social media at least as we know it now. How has that changed how you or your first sergeants interact with our airmen?
I think right now, we went through a pause, right? People were always saying that it's changed because we're not more interactive with our folks. We don't see them in the face. But I think now we have such a stronger presence of communication because you can tie that part with all the other social pieces that we have going on right now. I'll tell you, and you know this, before I came up here, I was not a fan of the whole, apps are us.
Yeah, you like an old man. You like somebody's old grandfather.
I stuck to it. I truly believe
how am I supposed to check into the airport?
I truly believe that you get the best out of your people when you can look them in the eye and they get direction and structure and they see you tell them what you need. But in lieu of where we are, I had to grow just like everything else in the military and just in life, right? Social pieces are part of the norm now.
Yeah.
I read that.
I'm proud of you, man. You've done well. You got a Facebook page. Was it earlier this year or was it?
Yeah, I was fortunate. One of my teammates, CMSAF Harry Bubba Kibbe, hooked me up with a page, and of course that has now led to a different traction. I mean, we are really getting a message out, and it's good to see when other people that you have no clue respond with a thank you. And that's
so do you think most leaders, not just first sergeants, but do you think the leaders that we have in the Air Force today have really embraced how our airmen communicate, whether social media, through Reddit, through memes?
Unfortunately,
or is there still
I still believe that we got a lot of folks still behind the redwood trees. They're trying to figure it out, but they have lost. They're so tied to what they knew that they don't realize the potential of expanding that. And that's part of growth.
Yeah.
I think a lot of folks, just like me, I was caught up in the time warp, but somebody handed me the keys to the DeLorean and said, you got to get in the game.
You are like somebody's grandfather because old men use all those redwood trees and like this stuff.
It's serenity.
The way you talk,
it keeps me right. Keeps me right.
You don't have any grandkids yet, but you like a grandfather.
Don't even talk like that.
Hey, let's transition a little bit to how you got here. You were literally 2 months from retirement when I called and asked you to join the team. Basically, dug you out of the grave and asked you to join Team 18. Why'd you say yes, man?
Well, I'll tell you, I was ready. A lot of people think that I was bitter with the Air Force, and it wasn't such. I was just ready. You kind of know that, you hear that. I think the Air Force was probably maneuvering a different way than what I was used to in how we were trying to get things done. And I think we overloaded ourselves with a lot of bureaucracy versus people business. And, I'm a fan of the people part. But when you called me to ask me to join the team, I'll tell you, you may think that it took a long time to figure out the plan, but man, that's God's work, man. The universe, right? I will tell you without a doubt that I saw you in action. I saw the facelift for the Air Force and the culture change, and just the dynamics of how you were poised to be part of the airmen, and that to me meant a lot because we didn't have that for quite some time. So I was very honest with myself when I made that decision. I wanted to embrace that, and I didn't want to be selfish, because this position is not easy, but I also know that it's challenging. But I also knew what kind of teammate I could be if given the opportunity.
And you've been a great teammate, man. I appreciate all you do. We always talk about iron sharpening iron, and we definitely do that for each other. But you remember when I first called you and then you told me about 15 things you weren't going to do and all this other stuff. I was like, hey, man, just go talk to your wife and call me back tomorrow and see if you want the job. But
I hear you. And I really hope that you didn't take it. I know when you sell that story out to the masses, there's always this, he told me what he wasn't going to do. I kind of knew the structure of this position and what my predecessors had for support. I did not want that. I needed, if this was a tag team effort, then we were going to meet this face value and take care of the airmen. That was priority one. And the time span that I've had under this position, we've changed the training. We've increased capacity in just the syllabus of the school. We've matured our growth by making sure that the right people are selected for this job. I mean, there's countless of things that I can just pinpoint, but as I sit at the helm of the world, I've been fortunate to have some great leaders out there helping me do it. So there's not a one-stop shop, right? Decisions that were made amongst the commands. So I'm fortunate to have had some great teammates to help me make those decisions.
Yeah, I would say typically when I visit First Sergeants or the First Sergeant Academy, nothing but positive feedback. So thanks for that. Looking forward, personally, let's talk personally, man. What do you want to get accomplished in 2020?
Well, I'll tell you, this is a close. We talk about this a lot, right? We got about 8-9 months left in the seat. I think we just want to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves as we run this race. To quote Chief Master Sergeant Air Force number 18, we're going to run through the tape and making sure that we are doing it steadily. And decisions that we need to make from here on out have to stay consistent with the same pulse, right? Same energy, but also making sure that we have everything embedded in the decisions. So I'm excited. First Sergeant community is growing. Yeah. So, that in itself tells me I got volunteers are back. So that's a huge plus in our First Sergeant world. We're no longer really DSD affiliated. The process is off. And we're going back to making sure that the right individuals know what they're getting into. That by far is a huge need for the force, right? Mm-hmm. First sergeants who really care about the give and making sure that they're taking care of themselves. So,
and the reason that I asked you personally, because this is a little bit indicative of, the challenge that we face, and one of the things that you and I tussle about quite often. So I asked you personally what you want to get accomplished, and you jump right back into first sergeant stuff. So tell me about balance. How do you, as busy as you are and as much stuff as you do for the Air Force and first sergeants, how you take care of you, man? How you put your mask on first?
Well, yeah, I'll tell you, I had to learn that all over again, right? We don't get to these positions without just kind of sitting on the sidelines. I've always been in hustle mode, and my A personality will drive that train hard. But I've realized that I've not done a lot good for self-care. Mm-hmm. So taking a knee at times and using those big words that I like to put out there about taking care of yourself. Mm-hmm. I need to do that now. And in the balance piece, I think I like your words too, harmony, right? How do I find that balance? I wake up now, I'll tell you, I love to read. Before I joined this team, I did a little of none of that. And that's because I was always in hustle mode as a giver, right? Yeah. But through the years, man, 3 years, I can't even emphasize how much I appreciated your own personal development on me, as taking that opportunity to open up a podcast or just pick up a book, and then you sharing those, and then me sharing back, and then it got to a point that we became our own Oprah's book club, right? We were pushing out with the message now being expanded to so many that ask, man, you guys have done so much, and I love your leadership style. Can you share a book that you've read? I mean, those are huge testaments.
I think one of the things that helps me is having an accountability partner when it comes to self-care and fitness and health. And for example, when we're on the road and we got our teammate Harry Kibbe, the fabulous Harry Kibbe, here with us too. When we're on the road, religiously, man, 5 o'clock, we're in the gym. We wake up and we get to the gym, and there's a lot of pressure if you decide. I think I slept in once or twice while we were on the road, and man, you never hear the end of it.
But you're absolutely right, Chief.
I think the last time Harry and I were on the road together, we actually got up and ran to the gym together. But I think having someone that helps you that holds you accountable for maintaining that balance, because we'll also you always tell me, hey man, get you some rest or go home, or don't do this or don't do that, and but balance, not only for us, but that's one of the things that I talk to first sergeants about whenever I get a chance to speak to them at base visits or at the First Sergeant Academy too.
No, you're absolutely right. that's part of the big picture for us, right? 3 years we've had each other, and I think for me that's personal because I see you more than I see my own family at times, right?
Yeah.
And but
we like a thing, man.
We are, man.
I like the way you said it.
You want to get into the bed, Bath
But the
and Beyond?
reality, yeah, we got our
I think
share
our
stories.
audience would like to hear
Maybe
that
later,
story.
maybe later.
That's the podcast extra. But the reality is that you're absolutely right. We keep each other on point. And I've always loved that about our team dynamics is that we are accountable to each other, and one of the reasons I share that as much as possible for anyone to make sure they got at least that one person that can keep them responsible for themselves. That's huge.
Yeah.
You know.
And accountability is not always pretty. I mean, if
Oh yeah.
like we argue and
battlefront too,
yeah,
right?
quite a bit. But at the end of the day, I know you have my best interest in mind. I have
No
your
doubt.
best interest in mind, and I appreciate it. Hey, one thing, lately, the topic on social media and amongst many of our airmen has been toxic leadership. So when we're obviously dealing with a suicide and resilience problem, and we asked the teams to do a resilience tactical pause. And from that, we started getting a lot of feedback about toxic leadership. And while, I know there's always three sides to every story, there seems to be a lot of people talking about, toxic leadership. Mm-hmm. How do you see this issue, and what should first sergeants, leaders at every level be thinking about in terms of?
I open up with probably saying that we really haven't defined what toxic leadership is. We kind of experiment with the opportunities to see where leaders are. People think leaders are failing, but a lot of our airmen really don't know. And when we have senior folks like us who are now redefining in their own terms what they think toxic leadership is, it can get captivating, and our airmen will run with that, right? You're late for work, that's toxic leadership, so there's a lot of different meanings behind it, but there's no doubt that we have some folks out there who really need to take a good look at themselves before they get out there and lead airmen.
Yeah. So let's talk about two different parts of it, and I'm interested in any advice that you would give first and foremost to an airman, a person who feels like they work under a toxic leader. Mm-hmm. Like what are some strategies for dealing with that type of environment? And then we'll talk about how to create a better environment.
Yeah. Well, the first line supervisor, right? That's probably the first pinnacle individual that you should probably have. Now, if that pinnacle individual happens to be the toxic.
Right. So what if my first line supervisor is toxic? Yeah. What should I do? How should I handle that?
I think stepping outside. I think the majority of I truly believe that a majority of our airmen really feel that everything that they have for any accomplishment or any moving forward has to happen within the unit. And I've always had most of my mentors and people that I consider leadership outside of my squadron. Mm-hmm. So just maybe looking for some advice. One of the things that we have built a huge staple on now is this offline, right? You're talking about social media, sites like Outreach, right? Where you have an opportunity to express yourself, right, and then hopefully have somebody chime in. Those are good avenues, but I would say start somewhere local. Find a peer that you trust, kind of bounce it off. Most of the time it's a vent, and our airmen just don't have that. They feel like they're alone. They don't have an opportunity to be expressive. And this is a different generation, right? This is an age of ingenuity. Mm-hmm. We got to let our airmen speak. And if you find that they have a voice, they may change some of the things that you have going on in your unit.
Yeah. So I think you mentioned the Air Force Wingman Outreach Facebook page is what you're referring to. And what I like about the page is that people do exactly what you're saying. They get on and they tell their story and they vent a little bit. But what I like more about it is I then see the community wrap their arms around them, sometimes collectively as a large community, and then sometimes I see people that are close to them or have the same type of challenge saying, hey, direct message me and I can give you some thoughts or advice.
Those things are huge, and these are strangers to a lot of folks, right? But what we're trying to build is a community where folks understand the trust. and that, you know, you may be dealing with some stuff. Let me tell you my story. Maybe we can find some median and getting you to the right place. You know, I'll tell you what I don't like to see is everyone who has an event, they always assume that it's medical, like it's an issue with, you know, and yet we deal with a lot of folks who have some mental illnesses in the Air Force, and we're challenged to figure that out and get them to the right people for the right resources. But at the end of the day, man, these are people. Like, these are airmen who are struggling with transition. And, you know, they should be able to walk up to someone and say, man, I ain't doing too good.
Yeah. So we have a responsibility to teach our young folks, you know, how to thrive in suboptimal environments, I guess you would call it. So if you work in an environment where there's a toxic leader, one, we want to make sure that you have some strategies, some mechanisms for coping and thriving and still achieving your goals and becoming the best version of yourself. But honestly, Manny, you and I, we also have a responsibility to root out some of this toxicity. Is that how you say it?
That's what I'm talking about.
And build better leaders. So how should you and I get after, you know, building better leaders, getting the right leader in the right place at the right time with the right skill set?
This is the hard line, right? When we talk about sometimes calling the baby ugly, right? A lot of folks who achieve chiefness, right, get to this E9 rank as a chief, really think that they've hit the pinnacle of their career, when in fact this is a start to kind of go through your own career, figure out what worked, what didn't work, and then redefine themselves. So talent management is big in my life, right? I do when I start defining how we choose first sergeants for maturity, for challenges, how to cope, no different than any other leader. You know, one of the problems that I see that we do is that we have a checklist for who needs to go and do what. You know, we send a new staff sergeant, tech sergeant, master sergeant down to MTI school, and we do a 360 overview. Basically head to toe check, mental, physical, make sure that they are stable psychologically. But they're training trainees. We don't do that for first sergeants. We don't do that for commanders. We don't do that for anybody else, to screen them and make sure that they are the right fit to lead airmen. And that's a struggle for me, because if we're taking that type of presence on a training environment, then we need to see this through. The right people to be recruiters, the right people to do these essential developmental jobs that we're asking them to do.
Yeah, so I mean, but some would argue that's, you know, while making sure we protect our trainees, especially given what happened in the past and I think we all know what happened down at Lackland in the past with MTIs taking advantage of some of the trainees. But you could argue that's a little bit overboard. So some of these same folks who go through that entire process and they get rejected there and they can't pass the test of sorts to become MTIs are protecting our nuclear weapons and have, you know, top secret security clearances.
You're spot on, Chief. So I think this is the balance piece that we talk about in selecting the right people, right? Yeah. I'll share that my career was based, and this is a personal hit, I probably shouldn't have been the person that has reached this pinnacle level solely based on who I was before I came into the military. But just as you...
Were you like a thug?
I was running pretty hard, you know, like Zulu Nation, you know, I was hardcore.
Like, remember the Wu-Tang Clan we never heard about?
Triumph, that was me. But the reality is that someone invested in us.
Right.
Someone saw more in us than we saw in ourselves. And I think that's something that goes back to, regardless of the job you have, you got to really know these people. You got to know what caliber, what they're gonna bring to the table.
Yeah.
You know,
bottom line is, you know, you like I said, you and I, we have a responsibility to build the right leaders and give them the right skills and the right attitude and timeliness. You know, that also counts. And I know you've been getting after that with the changes that you've made in the first sergeant, and we've been doing it throughout the Air Force with some of the things that we've been trying to do with our enlisted PME and trying to get better at managing talent, putting the right talent in the right place. And you know, we'll keep working on that, and we'll keep working on making our airmen more resilient, which is key to, I think, their overall readiness as well as their overall fitness and health. Hey, let's transition. I think Harry has some questions for us from the audience.
Yes, sir. These questions come from Reddit, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
Ooh, man, deep.
Yep. We've selected the best questions based on commonality. So the questions that we selected were actually asked on multiple venues. The question number one, Chief Piñeiro, is for you. Is what do the new DSD changes do for those interested in becoming a first sergeant?
Well, the beauty is that they are no longer part of the DSD process. So no longer does AFPC choose these individuals based on records and past performance. Those things still apply, but based on the new spec ad that we just pushed out, is that now they can volunteer. And you know, this is internally, right? So we're starting to grow these first sergeants right from the squadrons they come from. So the squadron leadership is heavily engaged in vectoring them up to the wing, and the wing will go right up to the MAGCOM and say, these are my, you know, top 5, and then they'll push those names to APC. APC will do our round search, and then we send them right back.
But wasn't part of the reason that we started DSD because we couldn't get enough volunteer
true.
first sergeants?
I'll tell you, and Chief Master Air Force, I think you're spot on with this. What we were doing is creating this volume for folks who probably didn't want to do the job. So we were selecting folks and probably putting them in a position where we weren't really vectoring if they were the right people, because we didn't want them to go to the First Sergeant Academy, get to their first unit, and then tell their story about how they were picked versus them going out there and volunteering to do the job. You know, if you hear some of these stories of these folks who actually are volunteering to be first sergeants, they're captivating, right? No different than us. First sergeant saved my life, and I want to give it back. I care about our airmen this much. I want to invest into them. These are real world conversations with senior NCOs who really want to invest into their airmen. So now they can volunteer, but their leadership has to be in the button. So they got to get all green lights from their leadership to say this is the right person. And we're fighting for those right people. We got a lot of folks who probably, again, never saw themselves doing this, but after they sit down with their leadership teams and they share how they see them, it maneuvers their opportunities to lead in this position.
Thank you, Chief. Question number 2. Is it true that it's hard to get promoted as a first sergeant?
Oh, well, I'll tell you, it's hard to get promoted in the Air Force, right? First sergeants are no different. It's challenging. I think as a senior NCO, the expectations that come with the position are challenging, but no different than any other senior NCO in the field. You got to apply yourself, right, to be the best version of you. And you can't cheat the system. I'll tell you what happened a while back. We saw a lot of folks that thought becoming a first sergeant was the easy button, right, to get promoted to senior and then to chief. And I think sometimes that direction is misleading. At the end of the day, past performance is based on what you do. And I think that's the direction we've taken now with no more testing, right? We want to see what you've done and performance. And that will automatically lead to whether or not you need to get promoted. You know, as a caveat, right, I remember having one of my commanders tell me that when you get promoted, it's the Air Force who sees the potential of you serving in that rank, right? But we lose sight of that. And I heard that. Just recently when we promoted our senior master sergeants to chief, you know, there was a lot of folks out there who probably were thinking, I'm on that list, that probably failed to do their part. That means staying consistent and keeping that, because there was an expectation. Oh, I'm going to get promoted, you know? And man, the fight is always the fight. You know, you got to stay in there. We got great airmen in our United States Air Force, and they're all worthy of a promotion. But we only are fortunate to promote a small pool, and those individuals need to make sure that they're doing their part. So my push to that question is, yeah, it's challenging, but man, you can do it if you really are deemed to do it.
Last question was not submitted ahead of time, but I'm sure it will be submitted once people are listening to this. What happened at Bed Bath & Beyond?
Oh, you sure you want to hear that story? I may put the Chief Master on the Air Force on that one.
No. It was Bath and Body Works, right?
It was Bath Body Works. Yeah, was it? Yeah, it was Bath and Body Works. Or Body? What's it called?
Bath and Body
Bath
Works.
Body Works. Yeah, Bath and Body.
So, so we were in Phoenix, and we went to a cigar lounge. It's called
Fine Ash.
Fine Ash Cigars.
That's right.
And
Did we
good-
just give a free plug?
yeah,
Oh,
that's
man,
fine.
That's not cool.
Yeah, it's a great great location, man. Great people, Sam and Rosie, and Xavier. So it was really good. Anyway, in the men's restroom they had lotion. So you go and you wash your hand, and they had this like 5 bottles of lotion. And it was amazing, right? It smelled good. It smelled like cologne. And so I came out and I asked Rosie, one of the owners, like, "Hey, where'd you get that lotion?" And she said, "Hey, Bed Bath & Beyond." And the next day, Chief P and I, Manny and I, we happened to be out at this
we're going to dinner.
outlet mall on our way to dinner, and we go to Bed Bath & Beyond. And so we go in and we see the men's section, and we find all this lotion. And man, we were like 2 kids in a candy store. We were the only dudes in there, and we were spraying lotion and rubbing each other's hands.
I
And
think
rubbing.
for context, Chief, both you and Chief P, the audience should know, y'all dress really sharp, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we were dressed for dinner, so
Yeah.
yeah. But we were like 2 little schoolgirls giggling, like, "Hey, smell this one! Hey, smell that one! This smells nice." And then we each bought up like 3 or 4 bottles of this lotion, and we didn't think, I don't know if people were watching us or not, and we didn't think anything about it until they gave us the little bag, the little pretty
The little baggie that comes with.
bag that came in, and
Oh,
we
it
were
was
walking
off the
down we were walking out down the mall with these little bags, smelling all pretty and smiling.
Till I realized what I was holding in my hand.
I wonder if any of our airmen saw us. They probably thought we were married to each other.
It was classic.
Yeah, it was-
Not that there's nothing wrong with that, but I felt
Yeah.
my whole demeanor changed because I was walking out with this little bag. I even had my pinky out.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
And then Chief P wanted to go shopping for sweaters.
You wanted to go
Then
shop
I
for
grabbed the
sweaters.
bag.
I
Well,
was
ready
like,
for-
no, man.
I
Let's
grabbed the bag.
put these
hardcore.
bags in the car first.
So the backstory also is that when y'all are on the road, you got to eat dinner a lot, and y'all both know a lot of people. Everywhere you go is an Air Force base. You're on the road 290 days a year, and so y'all are, like you said earlier in the podcast, one of the things I noticed when I joined the team, y'all are sometimes like an old married couple.
Yeah,
True, yeah.
True that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's
Yeah, that was pretty fun, man.
I'll tell you, Harry, you touched on something, and if I could, real quick, that's because of the respect level that we have for each other. There's no doubt. Chief Master Sergeant Air Force 18, most senior enlisted person in our United States Air Force, who trusts me as an advisor to provide him the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? And that's huge, right? That's a huge testament to our relationship because we actually had to grow. People assume that we've known each other throughout our whole career, and that's a compliment solely based on our relationship. They say things like, "Man, you guys must go back. When he asked you to join the team, where did you meet him?" And I go, "Man, I never met this guy before he called me." But the reality is that he trusted my professional demeanor. He valued what I brought to the table, and that is a huge platform to try to, my credibility had been established, good or bad or indifferent. I would have went on and retired and pressed on. He didn't need me, but having that opportunity for him
I
to
still
reach
don't
out,
need you, sucker.
I know. I just put it out there, so try to sell it to myself.
Chief, one of the things I've always wondered, I mean, it's obvious to us who know Chief P,
Yeah.
but you really, you didn't know him that well. Why did you? Because you interviewed people for the job, and you set your mind that Chief P was the right guy. Why? What was behind that decision?
Well, it's not that we hadn't spent a lot of time together, but Manny's reputation as a first sergeant and as a leader preceded him, and I arrived in Germany as the 3rd Air Force and USAFE command chief right after he left, maybe a year or so after he left. And I think there was a time I was prepping for a speech on enlisted history in the command, and during my research, Manny's picture kept popping up and these stories about him and all the things that he had done for the command. So that was my first introduction, and then we crossed paths a few times at various ceremonies, and we got a chance to talk a little bit. He was running the joint NCO leadership program over at National Defense University, and I came over to speak a couple of times, and so I had all these interactions with him, and I thought, man, this guy would be good based upon his reputation and what I've seen of him so far, and so I decided to ask him to join the team, and it's been great. So yeah, man, thanks for your service. We're like brothers, like literally like brothers, because we do get on each other's nerves. We fuss and cuss and fight, quite a bit, but it's all, to try to get after the unique challenges that we have in our Air Force. So yeah, thanks, man.
No, man.
Hey, man, what keeps you up at night?
Man, I'll tell you, these suicides, Chief. I think it's the same story that we've kind of bounced off each other on our travels, man. It breaks my heart, man, that a young 22, 23, even sometimes 40-year-old, a seasoned senior NCO who feels that they have no more options.
Mm-hmm.
Man, that bothers me because, we're the first to see these op reps. We see them from all over the world, and I'm talking every total force. And it still bothers me that we have these folks who choose this path where, man, there's so many other options, you know. So that still bothers me. And I think just the welfare of our airmen every day. I try to keep that as a point for what we do and the decisions that we make and how our decisions affect them.
Yeah, that's something that keeps me up at night and keeps a lot of us up at night. I feel good about some of the work that we've been doing, some of the work that A1Z and our team has been doing. I feel good about the Air Force Wingman outreach page and how our airmen and the community of airmen across the Air Force are really attempting to self-heal and taking care of each other. I feel good that we've dedicated more resources. We need more, but we've dedicated more resources to mental health and some of those challenges. So I'm hopeful that this trend will turn itself around.
And big kudos to the folks out there who managed that outreach page. I mean, Ian Bush. I mean, you see his name attached to a lot of the anonymous pieces, but a lot of folks don't know that Ian Bush is the son of Chief Master Sergeant retired Lucky Bush. Yeah. Who was the first Sergeant Academy Commandant. So it's in the DNA for him to want to be involved and engaged with our airmen. But those guys and gals out there who are still making a difference every day.
Yeah. So, hey, man, you set to retire next year in 2020, yes, September-ish.
Yes, sir.
And 32 years, yes, 33 years 30, it'll be when you retire?
32 and some change, yeah.
Wow, old Dusty.
Yeah, I know somebody right next door who's about 32.
Yeah, whatever.
Dusty. And
So what are you going to do next, man? What's next for you?
Well, sabbatical, a quick maybe a month or two of just trying to figure it out.
That's not a sabbatical.
It ain't my world, right? Not being engaged. But I definitely want to make sure that I start paying a little bit more attention to me and getting back to the things that I know are important to stabilize my family time. But I'm a father that's rich with pride, man. I got a great bride who's been my rock for 28 plus years, and that by far has been my testament. I hear it a lot when I go to retirements, what they're gonna miss or what they've received in development of being part of our profession, man. But man, being a father, man, and a husband, that's huge, and I put that ahead because that's all the support that I've had to do the things that I've been able to do. But I'm gonna probably stick to the speaking engagements. I like the fact that that people actually want to hear me say something. I think I appreciate the opportunity. I'm humble with the gestures when people ask me to come out and speak. And I just no different than anyone else, man. I'm just trying to keep it real. Yeah. And probably if all works into our master plan, we'll sit down and try to get some financial engagements to hopefully open up a little cigar spot.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And little Scotch cigar don't hurt anyone.
I know.
So I'm looking forward to. But truthfully, man, I'm excited, man.
Yeah.
I'm excited about the transition. People say it's hard. For me, this is easy money, man. I think what I miss most is this, right? But we're going to have this. So.
We're going to have this.
Yeah.
And I, for one, man, I appreciate what you do. I appreciate that you're excited, but you mentioned earlier that we got to run through the tape, and we got to finish strong. And so we got more work to do today. So we need to get back to work today, my friend.
Yeah, no doubt,
and,
man.
But this has been fun, man. I appreciate you, and I know all the first sergeants and all the airmen across the Air Force and all the people that you've touched in your time, not only in this role, but all throughout your time as a leader and a first sergeant. We all appreciate what you do, man. So thank you. And I look forward to, we'll retire around the same time. I look forward to seeing you on the other side, man,
No doubt,
just
man.
enjoying life.
Just
I'm going to take more than a month off.
Well, I'll be open, and if I can end by telling you thank you again for this opportunity to just sit down and we ain't had, I would say break bread, but we ain't got no damn food on this table.
Yeah.
But also, man, just the trust that you put in me to do my part, man. And one thing that I always remember is that when I asked you about this position, you said this is your lane. And just let me know how I can support you. And I tell you, that's huge, man. So I love you, man. And just
man, I love you too, man. Don't be getting all emotional. We
I know
got
it's
more
early,
work
man.
to do.
I'll have you crying soon enough because you are retiring for me anyway. So,
all right.
But just know, man, I'm thankful for this team, and I appreciate the opportunity to go out the way we've gone.
Yeah, thanks. Ladies and gentlemen, our guest for today has been the First Sergeant for the Air Force, the First Sergeant Special Duty Manager for the Air Force, Chief Master Sergeant Manny Piñeiro. So thanks again, Manny. And thanks to all of our teammates who submitted questions. And let me say a special thanks to the folks who made this possible. Mr. Tony Young, Master Sergeant Shinzato, Sergeant Walters. I think Juan has been behind the scenes helping us out. I think I didn't see him today, but I know he's helped us out quite often. And the main man, my main man, Senior Master Sergeant Harry Bubba Kibbe. So we wouldn't be able to do this without them. And lastly, let me thank all of our current and our future leaders out there who are on the front lines, leading your teams, taking care of all of our airmen. It means a lot to each and every one of us. If you want to hear more about the things that we're doing here in the Office of the Chief Master Sergeant Air Force, check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. This has been your Blueprint Leadership Podcast. Thanks for listening. I'm your 18th Chief Master Sergeant Air Force, Kaleth Wright. And remember, if better is possible, good is never enough. And you are your greatest competition.